5 years ago, my husband handed the final lifeboat to his lover, leaving me with a damaged escape raft. I pleaded with him to let me board the proper boat, but he shielded his lover behind him, pushing me away. You can swim, but Becky can't. Do you want to risk her life? I was swept away by the rushing current, and my right hand crashed against a rock, leaving me permanently disabled. Heartbroken and disillusioned, I filed for divorce. 5 years later, I became a renowned sculptor, famous for my one-handed carvings and celebrated overseas. My ex-husband, now married to his lover, returned to me, his eyes red, begging, "I divorced her. Will you come back to me, Flora Mills? How have you been all these years?" The voice I hadn't heard in 5 years echoed, leaving me frozen for a moment. I never thought I would see Ryan Cabot at my own sculpture exhibition. He wore a sharp black suit, looking more mature than before. On his left ring finger, he wore our wedding ring. I quickly looked away and forced a smile. "Thanks to you, I only have a disability in my right hand. My left hand is fine." He choked on his words, his face turning pale. "Are you still angry with me?" Back then, the situation was urgent. There was only space for 2 on the boat. I sneered and interrupted him, saying, "Mr. Cabot, there's no need to say more. I don't welcome you here. Please leave." Ryan stood frozen in place, regret in his eyes. After a long pause, he finally said, "I really want to apologize. Can we talk?" His guilt, delayed by 5 years, and his humble tone hit me like a storm, one wave after another crashing against my face. I had the security guards escort him out and retreated to the lounge, shutting myself off from his desperate apologies. Cold water splashed on my face, and for a moment, it felt like I was back 5 years ago. That day, Ryan had suggested we celebrate our wedding anniversary. I was so happy that I couldn't sleep the entire night. But when we arrived at the hiking spot, I saw Becky in the distance, her eyes gleaming with smugness as she smiled. "Mrs. Cabot, happy anniversary. Ryan told me you were going hiking, so I decided to come along." "You're not upset, are you?" Ryan snorted dismissively. "What's there to be upset about? If you hadn't insisted, I wouldn't have brought her." Ryan's open affection for Becky pierced me like a sharp sword, tearing my heart apart. I felt drenched in cold water. The dark circles under my eyes seemed to mock me, reminding me of how foolish I'd been. I turned to leave, but Ryan grabbed my wrist. "Why are you making a fuss?" "I cleared my schedule to celebrate the anniversary with you, and I just happened to bring Becky along." "Don't be so petty." His impatient words were like daggers stabbing at my soul. Suddenly, heavy rain poured down, as if the heavens were crying for this relationship that had derailed. The rain came in torrents, and before long, the path down the mountain was flooded. Ryan's face changed instantly. "This isn't good. We need to get down quickly." He let go of my wrist, putting the only life jacket on Becky and lifting her onto the small but stable boat before climbing in after her. "The lifeboat is for you," he said, as if I was somehow taking advantage. I rushed to inspect it, only to find a huge hole in the raft with water pouring in. If I boarded it, it would sink immediately. "We'll meet at the bottom of the mountain." Their boat drifted downstream, and I was pushed into the water. The turbulent current slapped against my face, flooding my mouth and throat. I coughed violently as my consciousness began to fade. Then, my right hand hit a rock, and I lost consciousness completely. I wiped my face dry and walked out of the lounge. My assistant spoke up. "Miss Mills, Mr. Cabot is here saying he wants to buy all of your works." The anger I had just managed to suppress flared up again. In the past, after finishing my sculptures, I would show them to him, but he would mock me. I believe in the diversity of aesthetics, but it can't be ugly. Even dogs would reject this. My grip on the sculpture tightened. My self-respect was shattered and crushed beneath his words, the pain so intense that it made my eyes burn. I never told him that it was the work that had won me an award. I never told him that I had seen him frame Becky's scribbled drawings and hang them up in his office. I took a deep breath, calming myself, and said, "Not for sale." Put him on my blacklist. A few hours later, after I had sent off the last group of visitors, I stepped out of the exhibition hall and saw a huge bouquet of lilies in front of me. Ryan spoke gently, his voice full of expectation. "Flora, I've booked the restaurant you like. Could you give me a chance to have dinner with you?" I glanced coldly at him and turned to walk away, but he grabbed my wrist. His tone was pleading. "Flora, please. I truly realize my mistakes. Let me explain, okay?" A car pulled up smoothly in front of me. I opened the door and shook off his hand, letting out a light laugh. Slowly, I said, "Ryan, perhaps you never remembered, but I'm allergic to lilies." He stood there frozen, his throat bobbing, but he couldn't say a word. The car sped off, the wind blowing across my face, but it still didn't quench the fire burning inside me. It was Becky who liked lilies. Back then, to please Becky, he had kept a lot of lilies at home. I was so allergic that my throat swelled up and rashes covered my body. I messaged him for help, but he never replied. When the doctor called him to explain the situation, he simply said, "Stop making a fuss. It's just an allergy. What's the big deal? You're being so dramatic." The doctor couldn't hide his anger when relaying his words. But now, even when he was attempting to apologize, he instinctively brought lilies, the very flower Becky adored. It was incredibly ironic. I pulled my coat tighter, trying to shake off the chill. When I got home and was about to rest, I received a message from Ryan. He sent me a photo of the tattoo he was getting. The design was of the small bear I had sewn for him to sleep with. "You said that as long as the bear was there, you'd be too. The bear will always be with me. So can you be with me too?" I paused for a moment, remembering our first anniversary. In addition to a large sum of money, I had personally sewn a cute little bear doll. My fingers were pricked by the needle, and when I gave it to him, I said, "As long as the bear is here, I'll be here." He cherished it, always keeping it by his side. Even when he went out alone, he would fasten the bear's seat belt. But later, the bear disappeared. When I asked him about it, he claimed it was lost by accident. But I saw through Becky's photos that the bear I had given him had become her sleep companion. My fingers tightened around the phone as I turned and blocked him. His delayed affection meant nothing to me. The next day, I found Ryan standing outside my studio. His voice was soft as he questioned me. "Why did you block me?" I furrowed my brow. What's wrong with blocking strangers?" Ryan's eyes instantly reddened, and he looked genuinely hurt. "How are we strangers? I'm your husband." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing and couldn't help but laugh. "Mr. Cabot, have you forgotten we divorced 5 years ago? 5 years ago, when I was rushed to the hospital. Unconscious and barely hanging on, you were sitting by my bed, feeding Becky soup. I woke up disabled and helpless, and you were probably talking about how Becky, a jewelry designer, had won an award calling me worthless. We got divorced right after the papers were signed. You didn't even wait a day before marrying her. Have you forgotten all that? With every word, his face grew paler, and the lunchbox he was holding fell to the ground, spilling chicken soup that released a greasy, nauseating smell. When I was injured, I had once mentioned I wanted to taste the soup he made. He promised me, but it all went to Becky. The chicken soup he promised me 5 years ago was finally made, but now I didn't want it. I turned away coldly. Mr. Cabot, remember to clean up the floor. As I said those words, I saw large droplets of tears fall from his face, hitting the ground with a sharp sound, like torrential rain after a long period of gloomy weather. I had never seen him cry before, even when his parents passed away. His eyes barely reddened. His voice cracked painfully as he said, "Flora, I was a fool before. I was always seeking excitement and forgot who truly deserved my love. I've woken up now, and I just want one chance." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe such shameless words were coming from his mouth. We were so happy back then. You'd wait for me at home, cook meals, and I'd take you out to buy you cakes. You loved me so much, and His words felt like sparks falling on dried wood, igniting a fire in my chest. I couldn't control myself anymore. I slapped him across the face. The crisp sound of the slap interrupted his words. I couldn't help but sneer. "So, now you realize how much I loved you. But what did you do? You chased thrills and followed through on that. Why come looking for me? I've distanced myself from you too. So, what more do you want? Is it that life's not going well? Or is your wife cheating on you, and now you want me to take the leftovers? Your fake, deep feelings are disgusting and low." His head turned away from the impact, and he forgot to cry. I took a deep breath and walked away without a second glance. Spending another second with him felt nauseating. This time, he didn't try to stop me. That night, I had a long dream. I dreamed of when we had just gotten together. Back then, he would travel to another city on his days off to buy me my favorite cakes. He'd rush to protect me when I was bullied. I thought we'd be happy forever. Until 1 year into our marriage when he met Becky. The same Becky who had burned my father's belongings, forced me to drink toilet water and taken photos of me naked. He had once promised me that if I ever met the person who bullied me again, he would make sure to beat them up for me. But when he met Becky, he broke his promise and fell in love with her. The man who had once stood by my side and favored me now coldly told me she was young back then. Why are you still holding on to that? Why is it just you and her who have issues? You probably made some mistakes too. She's apologized. What else do you want? I broke down over and over, only to see him withdraw further. All the things he once did that made me feel cherished now became daggers piercing my heart. This relationship slowly became like a pebble in my shoe. I kept telling myself it would be fine, that I could walk through it. But in the end, my feet became raw and bleeding. The pain was unbearable. The pounding at the door echoed in my ears, pulling me out of my sleep. As I opened the door, I was met with an unexpected face. Becky, dressed in the latest haute couture, couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or her exhaustion. I leaned against the doorframe, frowning as I asked, "What's the matter?" She kept peeking inside, her face burning with anger. "Where's Ryan? Where have you hidden my husband?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Oh, you're thinking like this? I don't bring other people's husbands into my home. You can't control your husband, so now you come to me for help? Rest assured, I've long since had no use for him. Ryan used and discarded like second-hand trash, and I'd had enough." Her face flushed crimson with anger, her chest rising and falling violently. "Ugh, Flora Mills, who the hell are you calling trash? What are you pretending for? I knew from the start that you divorced him with bad intentions. My child and I are already 4 years old, and you still seduced him into coming to New York. You have no shame." I rubbed my temple, and speaking in a low voice, replied, "He's not here, and I wasn't the one who brought him to New York, so stop bothering me." I tried to close the door, but she wedged her foot in and, in the next instant, pulled out a metal rod from her bag. "You're still lying. I saw his location. He's here today. I'm going to show you what happens when you play the mistress." Without hesitation, she swung the rod at my head. The sharp pain made the world spin as blood poured down my forehead. It felt like I was back in the days when I was bullied. I collapsed to the ground, and her cruel, mocking smile was the same one from 10 years ago. But now it was even worse. The rod kept coming down on me again and again. Her curses echoed relentlessly. "Mistress! I'll show you what happens to mistresses. I'll beat you into disability and see how you seduce men." I lost count of how many times the rod struck me. The pain became a dizzying blur, and I could barely see through the fog in my mind. All I could do was force out weak, fragmented struggles before I lost consciousness. I thought I heard Ryan's frantic voice, "Flora!" When I woke up, the sky was tinged with a reddish-purple hue, and Ryan's figure was bathed in soft light. "Flora, I'm sorry. It's my fault you're in trouble." I moved slightly, and the pain shot through me. I sneered. "If you know that, then get out." He struggled with his words, his Adam's apple bobbing as he looked down. Then he picked up a child and brought them to my side. It wasn't until then that I realized he had brought his daughter. The little girl looked at me with confusion in her eyes. "He'll handle things with Becky and give you an explanation. I'm already in the middle of a divorce lawsuit with her. In the end, this child will call you Mum. Be a good girl and call her Mum." The child pouted, looking like she was about to cry. "Mum!" The soft, tender voice echoed. Ryan smiled and praised her. "Yes, that's right." But before he could finish, his pupils constricted as a delicate little girl appeared at the door, her face full of concern. She rushed to my bedside. "Mummy, what happened to you? Why are you hurt?" Ryan froze in place, his face drained of color. He struggled to speak, his voice hoarse. "Why do you have a child?" I pinched Zoe's small face and comforted her. "Mommy's fine." Then I turned to Ryan, speaking calmly. "I never said that I wasn't." Ryan's fingers tightened, digging into Irene's hand, causing it to swell with red marks. "Dad, it hurts." Irene's agonized cry snapped Ryan out of his daze, and he hurriedly wiped her tears away. "I'm sorry. Daddy didn't mean to hurt you." He looked at me, about to say something, but was interrupted by a cool male voice. "You said you would take good care of yourself and not make me worry, right?" My husband, Benjamin, sat on the edge of my bed, opened a lunchbox, and slowly looked at Ryan. "You must be Flora's ex-husband." Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "You?" Benjamin gave a light chuckle. "I'm Flora's husband. Thanks to how badly you treated her, I got the chance to win her heart. As for your wife's malicious actions, I've already called the police. Mr. Cabot, rather than harassing my wife here, you might want to head to the police station and sort things out. As if to confirm the truth of his words, Ryan's phone rang. The voice on the other end was from the police. He gritted his teeth, staring at Benjamin with burning hatred. You don't understand the bond Flora and I had. When danger came, you weren't even by her side to protect her. What gives you the right to say anything about me? Benjamin replied calmly, My faults. I will apologize for. But I would never put her in danger. What do you think about that? Ryan's gaze instinctively turned to my disabled right hand. It was as if the air had been deflated from him, and he was left speechless. His fingers turned white, and after a long silence he muttered, Flora, after I handle this, I will apologize to you personally. He left, holding Irene in his arms. Benjamin fed me spoonfuls of porridge, his voice filled with guilt. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I've arranged for bodyguards and an automatic alarm system. The research isn't finished yet, but I had them make an exception today. It'll be back at the lab tomorrow, but I promise it will be done within a month. I couldn't help but smile. Silly, this isn't your fault. Aren't you angry? Benjamin gently kissed my forehead. I feel heartbroken, not angry. I am just worried, like I said, that I won't be able to protect you. Zoe climbed onto the bed, carefully hugging me. Zoe will protect Mommy. Her little voice was firm and resolute. My eyes immediately filled with tears, and warmth spread through my entire body. Yes, Zoe will protect me. The next day, Benjamin sent Zoe to her grandparents after arranging everything for me, then returned to the research institute. I stayed in the hospital for a few more days. Just as I was packing up to leave, Ryan appeared in front of me with Becky by his side. I sighed in annoyance. What do you want now? Ryan's voice was tinged with bitterness. Flora, I brought her here to apologize to you. I scoffed. No need. Your silence and leaving me alone is the best apology you could give. Becky extended her hand, as if to point and scold me, but Ryan shot her a sharp look. Reluctantly, she said, Sorry, is that enough? You're a renowned sculptor. You shouldn't be bothered by someone like me. Her word dripped with jealousy. Since marrying Ryan, Becky hadn't worked a single day, and her title as a new jewelry designer. Becky had merely used him as a means to climb social ranks. She had relied on that label to attract Ryan, and after that, there was no need for her to better herself. But now, with Ryan no longer interested, she was left with nothing. No career, no sense of worth. Just the remnants of a failed marriage and outdated luxury items. I won't accept this. Becky froze for a moment, then yelled in fury, Do whatever you want. Do you really think I was trying to apologize to you? Do you even deserve it? Without hesitation, Ryan slapped her across the face with the same decisiveness he had shown when he slapped me 5 years ago. Becky covered her face, her eyes wide with disbelief. You slapped me for her? I'm your wife, she yelled. Ryan's voice was cold as he replied, Apologize. Don't even think about it. Tears welled up in her eyes as she turned and stormed off. Ryan sighed in resignation, pinching the bridge of his nose. He glanced at me with guilt in his eyes. I'm sorry you got hurt so badly. Let me take you out to dinner. The bodyguard picked up my luggage, and I responded flatly. You're exactly the same as before, always loving someone other than your wife. A person like you has no right to share a meal with me. I turned and walked away with the bodyguard. Ryan shouted from behind, "Flora, I know you haven't let go. I'll wait for the day you change your mind." I put on my headphones, blocking out his voice. Once my injuries healed, I focused entirely on my work. Ryan tried to wait outside my door, but before he could even approach, the bodyguards threw him out. He followed me to my studio entrance. But before he could step inside the complex, security stopped him. Before leaving, Benjamin had bought up the entire area around my studio and replaced the guards with well-trained security personnel to make sure neither Ryan nor Becky could get close to me. Becky was deported to her country due to the assault incident. In just half a month, I had almost forgotten about them. Then came my second sculpture exhibition. Ryan showed up holding a blue hydrangea and handed it to me with a smile. "Congratulations, Flora. Your work is truly beautiful." I responded impatiently. "I remember saying that I don't want you here at my exhibition." Ryan smiled. "But this is an exhibition for everyone. Even if you don't want me here, I still have rights in New York, don't I? This is your favorite hydrangea. I wish you all the best today." I couldn't help but laugh at his shamelessness. I grabbed the hydrangea from his hands and threw it directly into the trash in front of him. "Now that you've said your piece, get lost." His hand, which had been suspended in midair, trembled slightly, and a brief flash of hurt crossed his eyes. But he still spoke softly. "I'll get the color you don't like. I'll go buy a new one." His humble demeanor reminded me of how I had been a few years ago. Back then, I had painstakingly cooked for him, only for him to dump it in the trash. "This disgusting stuff can't even be served at the table." I had apologized and asked what he wanted to eat. And he had said, "As long as I'm with you, I have no appetite." A few hours later, I saw a picture on Becky's Instagram of Ryan eating instant noodles with the caption, "So easy to feed." Instant noodles are enough. That's when I realized it wasn't the food that was the problem. It was me. He forced a smile. "I'll go buy a new one right now. Wait for me." As he left the exhibition, I walked over to the sculpture covered in a red cloth, preparing for the next part of the event. This sculpture was the result of 6 months of work, and it was the centerpiece of the exhibition. I'm glad everyone could attend this exhibition. This sculpture is called Achilles' Heel, inspired by a romantic story from ancient Greek mythology. The audience listened intently, their faces filled with expectation. When I finished explaining the story, I counted down from 3 and lifted the red cloth. But instead of the applause I had anticipated, the room fell silent and the air was filled with collective gasps. I turned around and my pupils contracted in shock. I had spent 6 months carving the sculpture with my left hand. Now it was covered in red paint, with trash and debris stuck to it, emitting a foul stench. The facial features I had painstakingly carved were defaced with black ink. It felt as though my brain had been hit with a sledgehammer. Before I could fully process what had happened, I heard someone shouting, "This is Flora's contempt and disrespect for New York. She's covering a revered figure with trash and paint. It's a blatant display of defiance. How dare someone like her call herself an artist?" The crowd, which had been astonished only moments before, now looked at me with expressions of scrutiny and disgust. A chill ran through me, and I quickly tried to explain. "That's not it. Someone tampered with my sculpture. I can show you." But before I could finish my sentence, someone in the crowd threw a book at me. The book hit me square on the forehead, making me dizzy. Once the first object had been thrown, it was like the floodgates had opened. Another followed, and several art critics and artists, those I had once been on friendly terms with, turned and left without a word. The rest of the crowd, ordinary citizens, seemed to find me the perfect target for their anger. They grabbed whatever they could, books, bottles, even pieces of my own sculpture, and hurled them at me. Once admired, my sculpture had now become a weapon for them to attack me with. The sculpture shattered, pieces flying everywhere. The bodyguards couldn't control the crowd. I was already bleeding, my head smashed open, feeling as if I were pinned to the ground, unable to move. Someone bypassed the bodyguards, grabbed the sculpture's base, and aimed to strike me. I gasped and closed my eyes, bracing for the pain. But the next moment, I found myself in a warm embrace. The sculpture struck. However, Benjamin didn't flinch. He simply asked, "Are you okay?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, tears began to fall. "Benjamin, it hurts so much. I'm so scared." He wrapped his arms around me tightly. "I'm sorry I'm late." But by the time the police arrived, the crowd had already vanished without a trace. Benjamin took me to the hospital, and only then did I realize he had 2 broken ribs. Tears continued to flow from my eyes as he endured the pain, comforting me with a soothing voice. "It doesn't hurt. I was just worried that if I went to the research institute, you'd be in danger." I clung to him, crying uncontrollably. And only after my wounds were bandaged did I begin to calm down. On the way home, my phone kept vibrating. I checked it and found an overwhelming flood of negative news about me spreading across social media. It wasn't just about the sculpture exhibition that had taken place that day. There were also numerous rumors about my affair with Ryan, a married man. I was being portrayed as a disrespectful, promiscuous woman. The comments from my home country were even harsher. "She's so shameless. I heard she stole Becky's husband before, and now she's still seducing him. Wasn't she supposed to be married to that research genius? What's going on? Is he too busy with work to come home, and she just can't stand being alone? Feel sorry for Becky. How hasn't she even been beaten to death by New Yorkers yet? Someone like her shouldn't ever come back to this country." Endless insults and curses flooded my screen. My fingers trembled uncontrollably as I tried to read. But before I could finish, a new post from Becky appeared on my feed. In the video, the slap mark on her face was especially visible. "I'm sorry to take up public resources, but I still want to settle this once and for all. Flora and I were high school classmates. She's always looked down on my family, bullying me back then. In winter, she shoved my head into the toilet. And there are many more outrageous things she did. I'm sure those of us from the same high school can testify to it. I don't want to dwell on the past, but you hit me in front of my husband. I really can't take it anymore. Ryan and I now have a 4-year-old daughter. Flora, please don't make her grow up without a father." The video quickly went viral with subtitles and was shared across social media platforms abroad. My reputation plummeted. Many netizens claimed to be my high school classmates, condemning me for bullying Becky back then. Some even said my injury was a result of being beaten by the original wife during an affair. My phone fell to the ground as the overwhelming flood of insults left me suffocating. Benjamin held me tightly, offering comfort. "I'll handle this. You just rest for now, all right?" His embrace was warm, and I wiped away my tears. With determination, I said, "I'll handle this myself." It's a way to make amends with the past, to give the version of myself that was bullied an explanation. He didn't say anything else, but arranged for several private detectives and went with me to file a police report. After we left the police station, I saw that Ryan had posted on Instagram. It was a photo of his divorce certificate with Becky, alongside a timeline of our relationship and marriage. I'm not a good person, but if we're talking about mistresses, I think Becky knows who the real one is. She didn't cheat. I wanted to reconcile with her. After marrying me, Becky spent money on male models and went on shopping sprees with luxury goods. That's why I asked for a divorce. As for the bullying, Flora never did such a thing. In just a few short sentences, his post quickly shot to the top of trending topics. Netizens began questioning the truth of Becky's claims and called for her to respond, but she chose to remain silent. Soon after, the private detective sent me the surveillance footage of Becky bullying me in high school and the video of her sneaking into my sculpture exhibition. I posted them online, and the online heat became so intense that my phone began lagging. Public opinion quickly shifted in my favor. All the people who had cursed me and destroyed my exhibition were now my supporters. Oh my God, how can someone like this exist, twisting the truth and talking nonsense? Ryan must be blind to marry someone like that. Flora's suffering is real. It's already hard for a woman in the domestic art scene to make it overseas, and she's doing it with her left hand. As the heat continued to escalate, someone dug up Becky's past. It turned out that before meeting Ryan, she had been married, but her husband was addicted to gambling and had accumulated so much debt that he sold her to the owner of a casino. She begged him to let her go, promising to pay off the debts. She learned jewelry design, won some awards, and earned some money, but it wasn't enough to pay off the gambling debts. She contacted a high school classmate. I had married a wealthy man and decided to focus on targeting Ryan and me. After marrying Ryan, the money he gave her allowed her ex-husband to pay off his gambling debts. Her ex agreed not to harass her anymore, and she could have lived well, but instead she pursued thrill in a luxurious lifestyle and even started gambling herself. Ryan and she fought constantly, and eventually, he thought of me. I turned off my phone and looked out the window at the falling rain. Looking down, I saw Ryan staring up at me in the rain. He called out, "Flora, I've already divorced her. Will you come back to me?" I rubbed my temples in frustration, then grabbed my umbrella and went downstairs. He stepped forward, trying to take shelter under it. I knew it. You must still care about me. I frowned and stepped back, putting distance between us. Ryan stood in the rain, his face full of confusion. I spoke plainly. "Ryan, I'm never getting back together with you. Can you get far away from me? Your persistence is really annoying." He bit his lip helplessly. "Is it because I didn't get a divorce that you're angry with me? How can you think I'm annoying? Flora, stop saying things that will just make me angry. It was my fault before, but I've changed. Come back to me." He reached out to grab me, but I slapped his hand away, suppressing the fury in my chest. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "How dare you think that after almost killing me during that hiking trip I would forgive you? Do you think I'm some cheap person? When we were together, you cheated with Becky. Then after marrying her, you wanted to cheat on me again. You can't have both. Don't you get it, Ryan? If you keep bothering me, I'll forget every single happy memory we had." His face turned pale, and he stumbled backward, water splashing beneath his feet. He shook his head, his face not just wet from the rain, but from tears as well. I love you. I was just confused before. But I've changed. I sneered. Can a broken cup be repaired? Ryan's eyes turned red. He began pulling at his shirt collar to show me the bear tattoo on his chest. I can tattoo it on my body. It will never disappear. I was disgusted. That bear tattoo on you makes me sick. He collapsed to the ground as if all strength had left him. Staring blankly, he muttered, I'm disgusting. I think I've made myself clear. Don't come bother me again, I said, glancing at Benjamin, who was standing at the door. I'm worried my husband will get jealous. Ryan saw I was about to leave and began slapping his own face. His face quickly swelled with redness as he knelt in the rain, slapping himself again and again. His hands echoed louder than the sound of the rain. I didn't mean for you to die. The situation was urgent. She couldn't swim. It wasn't intentional. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Benjamin pulled me close, his gaze cold and commanding as he looked down at Ryan. Mr. Cabot, begging is not allowed here. I couldn't help but laugh. Ryan froze, his hands suspended midair. He looked utterly pitiful in the rain, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Benjamin's arm around my waist. In a fit of rage, he angrily got up and punched Benjamin. You bastard! Who allowed you to touch my Flora? Benjamin was quick, stepping back just in time. Ryan's punch missed, and he stumbled, falling to the ground, splashing water everywhere. Benjamin snapped his fingers, and several bodyguards immediately shabbed Ryan and dragged him away. Ryan struggled, shouting, Flora! Flora! Benjamin and I didn't look back. After that, Ryan never sought me out again. Public opinion online gradually quieted down. The police informed me that Becky had escaped. They were intensively searching for her and advised me to stay safe. Benjamin and I immediately considered a possibility and withdrew my bodyguards from around me. A week later, as I was leaving my studio, a car came speeding toward me. The police and bodyguards who had been lying in wait rushed toward me. Just as they were about to reach me, Ryan suddenly appeared from nowhere. He shoved me aside, only to be struck by the car with full force. He was thrown under the wheels, his body mangled and covered in blood. My pupils dilated in shock. Through the haze of blood, I saw him trembling, raising his hand to wave at me. The diamond ring on his fourth finger gleamed brightly in the sunlight. He said, Flora, the diamond ring you threw away all those years ago, I found it. I looked at the ring in his palm, engraved with my name. My fingers instinctively clenched. That was the wedding ring I'd thrown in the trash when we divorced. My mind went blank for a moment. The blood spread out across the ground. Before I could regain my bearings, Becky emerged from the car holding a knife. She advanced toward Ryan, slashing at him. She ripped open Ryan's collar and began scraping away at his tattoo. With each cut, blood poured out. You'll pay for being unfaithful. You'll regret ever leaving me. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ended up like this. You'll die with me. You'll die with me. Her screams were terrifying, full of rage. Ryan's face went pale from the pain, but his hands still hovered weakly in the air. The police rushed forward to subdue Becky. Ryan's chest was a mangled mess of blood and flesh. The little bear tattoo, once a symbol of his love for me, now lay exposed as nothing but a white broken skeleton. The knife was lodged deep in his chest. like a flag of conquest. Ryan's face turned ashen, and he could no longer speak. He struggled to mouth something at me, but I tried to make out the words. Benjamin covered my eyes. Don't look. Don't be afraid. I heard the harsh sound of Ryan's hand hitting the ground. The ring seemed to roll toward my feet, but it felt as if it had lost all meaning. It left no trace in my heart. Becky was eventually sentenced to death. Benjamin and I took care of Ryan's funeral arrangements. Sitting by his grave, I suddenly recalled the gesture Ryan had made with his mouth the day he died. He had said, "I'm sorry, Flora. I love you." I sat in silence for a long time before finally speaking. "Ryan, in the next life, let's not meet again." The autumn sunlight was gentle and lingering. Benjamin held Zoe in one arm, and my hand in the other. Our three shadows stretched long in the warm light. A soft breeze blew, and for a moment, I thought I heard Ryan's voice. "Flora, be happy. I will be happy."